Hi, I'm speaking to you from my constituency office for another Friday update. Today, because of internet connectivity, I've decided to come into the office to work. The office remains closed to the public. My staff are working remotely, so we're able to take your phone calls and to respond to email, but just no in-person visits at my Crowfoot office. So this past week, Parliament has in a very limited way begun to resume its work. The original order to suspend Parliament expired on April 20th, which was this past Monday. On Monday, we adopted a new measure that will carry us through to May 23rd. Until then, we will meet for a short period every Wednesday with a limited number of MPs. And there will be then in-person accountability with members of the government and elected members of the opposition. And these accountability measures are extremely important. There is just no substitute for an in-person session between elected members and the government. Each day, the Prime Minister comes out and speaks to the media, and the media have a very important role to play in democracy, but you as a constituent didn't vote for and no voters in Canada vote for the media. You vote for your own representative to speak on your behalf and demand accountability from the government, and there's just no substitute for that. The House of Commons administrative staff have admitted that they don't have the capacity to run a proper full Parliament virtually, and when Parliament passes laws, they are binding on 37 million Canadians. That just simply can't be done on the fly with a made-up virtual system. So until we get a lot further along the road, we're going to have to still use the chamber, and it can be done safely with a limited number of people. For anybody that watched the questions that came up this past Monday, I think that the debate was cordial, it was productive. It was substantive or substantial, and it it was really one of it demonstrated, I think, and proved to people that our institutions matter and that our institutions can function in a time of crisis. So for the next several weeks, there will be some questions and responses and accountability, and a day set aside where there will be the ability for the government to introduce new legislation. So, for example, this past week they announced another aid measure, this one aimed at students. That aid package is going to require legislation, so there will be the ability for the government to table bills, for the opposition to debate them, and then to vote on them. And that's how it has to be in a democratic country. So I am pleased that Parliament is functioning. I would have liked to have seen maybe several days of the week where this accountability can come up. There are many questions that Canadians have, and they have to be answered by the government and asked on behalf of voters by their elected representatives. So the question that comes up probably the most frequently right now in the email traffic I have are really around how are we going to be able to get back on with our lives, and the question of how to safely reopen the economy is one that this government has to address. It is not acceptable for the Prime Minister to simply say that there can be nothing can happen until there is a vaccine. I do not believe that there is capacity on the Government of Canada's part to entirely support the Canadian economy for perhaps years. There's just no substitute for a working population. The aid measures that have been announced so far in many ways are very necessary, and people are desperate, and I continue to hear from small business owners, from people that had lost their jobs in the oil and gas industry, all kinds of people who have fallen through the cracks. And yes, it's important that we support people, but the aid measures and the general support for the entire economy must be temporary, and we are going to have to, in some way, in a safe way, make sure that eventually that we can get back to work. So I'm going to continue to hold this government to account, to participate through with my caucus colleagues in parliamentary accountability measures like the committees that are meeting, and in communication with my colleagues that are in Ottawa. And until then, please continue to be aware of and follow your local health authorities. And for the latest information on aid measures, please go to my website, patkelly.mp.ca, for links to the most current information.